I'm Rick Edwards. I'm the Chief of Police for the City of Richmond. Today we're going to be doing our 2024 year in review and also give the community some updates on our latest, on some latest topics. So, for those of you that know, this is a familiar faces. We have Deputy Chief Sidney Collier, Deputy Chief Civil Amin Jones, Deputy Chief Albert Stokes. We have Major Ronnie Armstead as part of the command staff, Major Adrian Gardner, Major Daryl Goins. We also recently promoted Major Keyshawn Mans. So he is in that, he was promoted and he is in charge of patrol services. I also have an update for folks on our most recent officer-involved shooting. So as you will remember, on October 15th, 2024, we had an officer-involved shooting in 2900 block of East Broad Street. The officer who was involved, John Mitchell, is a 3-year veteran with the Richmond Police Department. He is assigned to 1st Precinct. We recently received a declination of prosecution letter from the Richmond Commonwealth's attorney. That is the update in this case. And now, per our policy, we will be moving in our internal review. He is still currently on administrative paid leave. So at this time, I'd like to ask U.S. Attorney Jess Aber to come up. So we always talk about collaboration. This has been a long time coming. I see Captain Jackson in the back. He's the former commander of 1st Precinct. His team did a tremendous amount of work on this case. But this is something we're ready to release an update on, the very famous in Union Hill Yellow House. I also see one of the neighbors in Union Hill and Worsham, who was one of those folks that came forward, one of the many folks that came forward and talked to us about the very specific concerns involving the Yellow House. So, Ms. Aber?
Thank you, Chief, and I appreciate this opportunity to tell the community a little bit about what we would consider a success in the partnership between RPD and the federal law enforcement. I am proud to have called Richmond my home for most of my life, and the greatness of this city is in its people and its communities. And the Yellow House is just that. It was part of the community. It is part of the community. It is a residence in Union Hill. It was once a lovely home on Venable Street. And it was neglected and abandoned, and it was filled in that void by those who sought opportunity. Since 2008, the unoccupied Yellow House depicted here drew elements of drug trafficking, fighting, overdoses, public urination, prostitution, and other crime in an otherwise lovely neighborhood, and it became a hub for activities that are antithetical, frankly, to the values and aspirations of the residents of Union Hill. And as the chief and I discussed, there's no way to arrest your way out of the problem, although certainly RPD over this almost 2 decades tried to arrest folks in the home, prosecute people, seize contraband, seize drugs. But ultimately, we needed to find a way to make the Yellow House off limits for drug dealers. And everyone played a part in the community in this endeavor. First, residents like Ms. Worsham were able to come forward and say, this is a problem, here's what it is, here's why it's ruining our quality of life. Federal and local law enforcement sought to arrest individuals in the home, seize the contraband, seize the drugs, time after time. And ultimately, Chief Edwards came to me and said, can you do anything about the Yellow House? And so the smartest attorneys I have, who are seated in the back, put their heads together and decided there was a way, working with the DEA, to file a lawsuit against the property. And they did so last year. A lawsuit in federal court against this particular house, explaining that it was involved in drug trafficking. And ultimately, the owner of the Yellow House never responded. And so the property was forfeited to the United States government. The court ruled because of the showing that we had made and the default of the owner, the Yellow House will be sold, it will be cleaned up, and it will be used for productive purposes. And we want to share this with the community because it is, frankly, a good news story. And it is one that reflects the strong partnerships between federal and state law enforcement in this town. And I want to thank you, Chief, for the opportunity to explain what happened here.
Great. Thank you for your partnership.
Thank you, sir.
And I just want to be clear as well, this is rare. It's not something we think is appropriate for every time we find drugs in a house, even multiple times. I need to be clear. This we know it goes back to complaints in 2014. We started doing search warrants in 2016. Talking with Ms. Worsham, she says it goes back much further. So I think This is a special case. It's not one that I think we'll be doing more often unless we have this kind of these kind of issues here. You know, we had dead bodies here, overdoses, and just creating issues for that community that I think now is. And I will say this: so since December, since the civil seizure, we've had 0 quality of life calls for service. So no overdoses, no disorderly conducts, no drunken public 911 calls, and I hope that stays. So now I'm going to be talking to you all about our violent crime updates for 2024. So this is, again, some good news. We're down in homicide 18%. We're down in rapes 19%. Robbery commercials, which was a concern earlier in the year, down 20%. Robbery individuals, which was very high, if you remember the first quarter when I put it out, is down 4%. Aggravated assaults down 2%, and overall violent crime down 5%. And the important part of that is, as you know, we had a significant reduction in violent crime last year, so we're fighting those good numbers and continue to drive that violent crime down. And as I always do, when I talk about Richmond, I want to talk about Richmond versus Richmond in the past. And you can look, violent crime over the last 10 years, since 2014, has been trending down. And for the first time that we could find in the data, we are under 1,000 violent crimes. We thought we were close last year. I felt really good about it, and we were up. But this is the lowest we've been able to find. And I know it's not always obvious for folks. Doesn't always feel that way. But this is the hard data. So 967 violent crimes. So we're down from the 10-year average of 1,150. So positive news regarding this. Again, murder threshold. So we've averaged about 60 murders per year over this 10-year period. Very good numbers in 2014, 2015, but you can see where we spiked in 2021 of 90. This year, again, we're at 53 for a significant reduction again. I see Captain Hudson in the back. He is the commander of the Major Crimes Division, and this is a number that he obsesses about. So the clearance rate on our homicides. Year to date, this is the highest homicide rate clearance we've had, 56.6%. And it's important to note, if you look at the next line, the IBR clearance rate is 88.7. And what that is this year, the Richmond Police Department cleared 14 homicides from previous years. I think the oldest one was 1998. Is that right, George? So that's a case that and I think every time I go to community meetings, someone comes up to me. It's very often someone will come up to me and say, my loved one was killed. Can you look into it? And I always call George, and he'll look into it. And it's important to note that we never give up on these cases, and if we can solve them and get answers for the families, we always want to do that. So individual robberies. If you look back in 2014, this was a major violent crime for us. And when we look at where it's trending down, we were at 173. So if you would compare us to 2014, down 59%. 59% in robbery individuals. And even yesterday, we had a robbery shooting in the 1700 block of Clarkson Road, where 3 males with firearms were suspects, and this happened very early in the morning. There was a robbery attempted shooting in the 1500 block of Clarkson as well, and 3 males involved in that as well. And a vehicle description was put out over the air. Detectives were circulating the area, found the car, and made arrest of 3 individuals who were juveniles. 2 firearms were recovered, and that was an arrest. And the reason I want to highlight that is if you look at our robbery heat map from last year, that burning red light, that is Southwood. That is our largest community, our largest apartment complex with thousands of residents. And it has historically been our biggest challenge for individuals being robbed. So this is not so great news when you compare us to last year. So we had a 5% increase in non-fatal shootings. Now I preface that by saying 2023 was a really great year for us. The year before was 257, 190 last year, which we were really pleased about, and we ticked up about 5% this year, but still, if you look, again, Richmond versus Richmond in the past, here's the non-fatal shooting thresholds going back 10 years. So the average is 204, so we were below that 204. And you can just see how high we got in 2022, 2021, and 2020. So while no shootings, no murders or acceptable to us, I believe it's still trending in the right direction. I'd also like to give an update on the auto sears. So Ms. McEachin and I lobbied to the General Assembly to make that illegal in state law to possess an auto sear. Our friends at the Attorney General's office put out a lot of good advertisements talking about the ramifications for possessing an auto sear. So you can see we're down in our seizures. In 2023, we had 18 seized. We had 8 seized this year, the entire Richmond Police Department. And the reason that's down about 56%. But the interesting part of that is we seized 5% more guns than we did last year. So more guns are being seized, but we're seeing less of these deadly devices, which I think is a positive side. All right, so we always talk about our hotspots. So last 6 months, we had 23 hotspots. These are individual locations within our city that are broken down into 1 to 3 block areas, 29,000 of them in the city. The 23 hottest blocks were the last 6 months. We consolidated a few of them. We made a few changes based on 6 months of recent data. And we now have 17. So these are the 17 spots. If you go on your phone right now and look for a call for service, you'll see something called a hotspot curve. Last year, we completed over 21,000 of them, and what that is a 10 to 15 minute visit in an area that's experiencing gun violence. One of the 5 gun violence indicators that we look for, which is homicides, non-fatal shooting robberies, non-fatal shooting aggravated assaults, shooting into an occupied dwelling, and shooting into an occupied vehicle. And when our analysts and our investigators looked at it, these are the hottest spots in Richmond, and we will, for the next 6 months, these will be where we have our officers spending those hotspot curves. I've already briefed out about Operation Safe Summer, but I think it bears repeating the partnership. I think that's one of the reasons while in the early part of the year we were ticking up in violent crime. I think for that time period we were able to get a handle on things, and it was all because of our partners. And for that time period, we had the lowest in 7 years of violent crime. We seized a lot of guns. We only had 108 people shot, which is lower than the last 2 years, and 20% down from the highest year, and an 18% decrease from the high point in 2018 to this year. So really looking at Richmond versus Richmond, that partnership with ATF, DEA, FBI, U.S. Marshals, U.S. Attorney's Office, Richmond Commonwealth Attorney's Office, and of course our partners in the Virginia State Police were out in force this whole summer, working hand in hand together. Last quarterly press briefing, you saw the Assistant Special Agent in charge of ATF talk about an operation where they worked in these high crime neighborhoods and were able to make a significant dent in violent crime. So something I always talk about and something that is very concerning to our community is our safe roadways. And I have some good news to report on that. So our traffic fatalities in 2022 were at a high of 28. The previous year, the next year in 2023 was 25, and this year there's 17. And I'm cognizant using those numbers when I speak about those numbers, even with our murders, that every one of those numbers represents a human being that's no longer with us. And while I'm pleased with a decrease of 32%, it is still tragic and preventable in many cases. So another question we get a lot is our safety camera program. So both the second expansion locations are now online. That's Thomas Jefferson High School and Richmond Technical School of the Arts. And the grace period ends February 26th. So as you know, you have a, you have a grace period where you will get a notice in the mail. And then after that, the tickets start. And that's my next slide. This is an incredible number. 26,732 citations were reviewed and issued to Richmonders. And you can see the Linwood Holden had 7,256. Linwood Holden is one of the original, but the one that's the fastest and the one that's going to be probably the largest going forward is the one on Chamberlain, which is 3817 Chamberlain at Francis McClenny. So that is 6,000, and that started in October. So the others had a much longer time, so that will quickly overtake Linwood Holton. But this is a process that we utilize, and I have to, as you know, have to have officers review each one before the summons is mailed out. And it is labor intensive for us in that sense. I have 4 part-time officers that do nothing but review these videos, but there's no way 4 officers could write 26,000 summonses in the way this is happening. So we anticipate more going forward. So now to transition to property crime. So it may seem like a small increase, but shoplifting is one of our biggest overall crimes. It's unfortunate. The trend continues. 49% of all of our shoplifting, that's over 1,800 of them, are at ABC stores. We're working closely with ABC. We've made some progress in some of the stores, but it's still trending up. And this number, if you were to look at the violent crime, which is trending down, the shoplifting's trending up. Our burglary commercials are up as well. While the burglary residentials are down 1%, theft from motor vehicles, which is almost always our biggest challenge, is down this year 10%, but still an incredible number. So we went from last year 2,700 to this year 2,429 for a 10% reduction. We also saw a reduction in motor vehicle theft from 1,571 to 1,469 for a 6% reduction. That leads to a 2% reduction in property crime from last year and an overall reduction when you combine property crime and violent crime for a major crime reduction, which we're very pleased about. Theft from motor vehicles, this just kind of highlight on it. So we saw that 10% reduction. The majority of both of those are folks that are leaving their, no forced entries noted, so it looks like they're leaving their cars unlocked. We would continue to ask, while we saw this 10% reduction, for folks to continue to lock their cars, take any valuables, put them in the trunk, and certainly, my next slide, never leave your firearms in a car. So we're trending in the right direction with this as well. We saw a reduction last year, but 540 guns were taken out of cars this year. That's lower than 643 of last year, but 540 guns are in the hands of people that shouldn't have them by definition, folks that are stealing guns. And when we looked where it is, it's almost all in the Shockoe bottom, that blinking red light. So 26% of guns stolen out of vehicles are taken from the Shockoe area. So that's the combination of the neighborhood of Shockoe bottom and the neighborhood of the Shockoe slip. And this is a totally preventable crime. It is incredibly frustrating for me. And it's something that, as I mentioned at the last press conference, we had an officer shot this year. The gun that was used to shoot that officer was left in an unattended car in one of our counties. So again, totally preventable. And it ended up in the hands of a teenager who shot one of our officers. So that is something that we continue to need to work on with our community. And here's an even better breakdown from the firearms theft and motor vehicles. If you look at it, this was a non-issue in 2014. Look at the proliferation, the citywide total, where it was 82 guns stolen out of cars, and now we went from 637, 643, and trending downward a little bit. But again, in 2022, that's when we saw the proliferation of guns stolen, particularly out of the Shockoe bottom. And you know, I don't know what's behind that. I don't know if it's new folks coming to the city who think that they can leave their guns in their car like you may be able to do in a rural environment, or it may be the unintended consequences of the new law that came into effect in 2020 where individuals in the state had 48 hours to report a lost or stolen gun. And maybe these guns were being stolen before and folks just didn't bother to call, and now they are. But either way, these guns are ending up in the hands of criminals, and it's something we need to work on. All right, motor vehicle thefts. This is, you know, on the face of it looks good, but I want to be clear with you, 6% reduction we're happy with. But as you can see, in 2023, we had 1,571. We count, if you break the steering column on a car, we count it as attempted. So it goes towards that 1,571. but we designate, like this happens when a person who owns a Hyundai or Kia almost exclusively walks out, finds their window smashed, and sees the steering column broken. And either the car has the update or the thieves don't know how to steal it, but they still ruin that car for that citizen. It's thousands of dollars. It raises insurance. And while it's trending in the right direction, where we're seeing less cars stolen and more attempts, I think the less success thieves have with stealing Hyundai and Kias, the better we're going to be. And again, 6% reduction on the face of it looks good, but it's not good when you compare it to 2020, 2021, and 2022, where we're under 1,000 each year. If I was talking to this group 3 years ago, 4 years ago, we'd be talking about not leaving your keys in your car, not leaving your car running when it's cold outside, and we still stress that to our community, but the majority of our cars that are being stolen are Kia and Hyundai. Something I always talk about too is our accidental shootings. So we are trending up this year. 25 accidental shootings total last year. We have 28 this year. 8 juveniles were shot accidentally last year, including a 3-year-old. This year, that's a little lower, 5. But 2 of those juveniles were very young children, 4 years of age. So on January 24th of last year, we arrested LaDonis Hollad, age 33, for felony child neglect and possession of a firearm by a convicted felon. He was in the 3600 block of Richmond Highway, and his very young child accidentally shot himself. And we are currently investigating an incident that took place on New Year's Eve. Detectives, they're investigating the circumstances of this incident where another 4-year-old was shot in the 1900 block of Maddox Street. So very concerning again, and this is why every time I get before you, I talk about this program where the Richmond Police Department has invested in grant funding to buy quality safes. Now, we used to give out those gun locks. Nobody uses those gun locks, so we stopped doing that. We know that these quality safes, while they may be more expensive, people will actually use them, and we've given out 336 of them. One of those this year, a commander called me, and we learned that there was a threat at a school, one of our local schools. It was not enough to charge that student, but the student knew something about where his mother kept her gun, knew it was in her purse, on her night bedstand. So that lieutenant went to the house, provided a gun safe to that mother. There was no charges. We couldn't charge her with anything, but we educated her, we documented that, and we gave her this safe because I don't care what the cost is. If it saves one of our kids from being accidentally shot, it's all worth it. Another program we have is continuing. When we look at the reduction in our stolen vehicles of Kia and Hyundais, we have wheel locks that we are giving out free to Richmond residents. So if you or anyone you know lives in Richmond and has a Kia or a Hyundai, stop by one of your local precincts or even come here or approach me and we'll get you one of these for free. This is the best way we know to deter crime and stop thieves from stealing these specific cars. All right, just want to give an update on our gun buyback program. So for the 3rd year in a row, we've done it. The first year in 2022, we collected 474 guns. This was the first year it was being done. People were bringing in all kinds of things that I think are maybe technically were guns, and we gave them gift cards, but then we got tighter with what the expectations were. People were showing up with privately manufactured guns and I think scamming us a bit. And then in 2023, we knocked that out. So we only had 260, and then this last year we only had 124, and that took place in December, and that was at New Life Deliverance Tabernacle with Pastor Robert Winfrey partnering with us at 900 block of Decatur, where we were giving gift cards to folks who wanted to turn in their guns voluntarily. And I get a lot of questions about that. Is that is that going to save the kind of gang member guns that we're seeing? And I think I always push back and just say it's part of our strategy. I understand very well that gang members are not likely to come turn their guns in for a gift card, but we're taking unwanted guns and unsecured guns off of the street, and these are not sold back to the public. They are destroyed and can never be used to hurt anyone again. I briefed this out in October at Richmond City Council, the public safety briefing, but I want to just give you an update since it's up and running. We have invested in gunshot detection. We are starting in the East End. I always talk about our investment in technology. This is the outline there is the location. This is what they look like. Sometimes citizens call me and ask, what is that? And what it does is when a gun is fired, we obviously have our Capital City Intelligence Center up and running. They're monitoring this. When a gunshot is fired in our city, it gives a lat and longitude of where that location is. That's beneficial for two reasons. The first one is it enables us to find victims really quickly, an exact location. The second one, in the example of this, or find the crime scene too. An example of this, I responded to a shooting recently in Fairfield Court. The individual who was shot ran probably 5 or 6 blocks from the actual crime scene. So we were trying to establish where the crime scene is. The members of the Capital City Intelligence Center, utilizing this data, narrowed it down for us. They utilized cameras, and they were able to show where the actual crime scene was. We were able to find cartridge casings, which is incredibly important for me. So, and we'll talk about why that's important. But this is the program. It benefits us in faster response times, has certainly investigative benefits. It's a resource optimization, and it has a great community impact, we believe. And the other benefit is our existing program of NIBIN, which stands for National Integrated Ballistic Information Network. Now, what that is every time a semi-automatic firearm discharges, a cartridge case is ejected. Those cartridge cases have individual markings on them that are similar to a fingerprint. So in 2023, we tested, there were events. We tested 1,570. There were leads in 510. So 32% of the casings that we recovered in those cases linked back to some other case. And that's really important for our investigators because, and very similar the following year, less, but the same percentage of connections. And why that's so interesting to us is while we might have very little on a homicide case, there might not be cameras or witnesses to that, but maybe 30 minutes later someone shot a stop sign and those cartridge cases can be matched up, and very quickly. It used to be NIBIN, we would get those leads back 8-10 months later. Now they're coming back within days, and it's a great lead for our investigators. All right. And now I'd like to ask forensic technician Savannah Cryle to come up and talk about some new technology. We always want to explain where we're investing our technology. So Savannah, can you explain it better than me? I don't understand it as well.
Thank you, Chief Edwards. I'm Savannah Cryle. I am a forensic investigator currently assigned to the forensic unit here at Richmond Police Department. Today I have the pleasure of sharing some new technology that we have added. We have 2 new cutting-edge devices that we have added to our forensic toolbox. The devices broaden our capabilities and capabilities of processing crime scenes and evidence. Both devices are new to the forensic world and are at the forefront of crime scene investigation. The first tool that we have added is the MVAC system. With that, we were the first department in the state of Virginia to be able to purchase and utilize this system. The second tool that we added was a forensoscope. This is a simple camera system, and again, we set milestones with that. We were the first department in the entire United States to be able to use and own a forensoscope. With that, I'll give a brief explanation of each of these. The MVAC is a new system that is capable of collecting small amounts of DNA, trace DNA. It is a pressurized system that is essentially a wet vacuum. It has an apparatus that you can see right here that is passed over the evidence, and while it's being passed over the evidence, it dispenses sterile water onto the surface, penetrating that and knocking loose any potential DNA that may be present. While it's doing that, it is also vacuuming up that sterile solution. That sterile solution is then passed through a specialized filter that collects any DNA that may have been collected. Using this method of collection, we significantly increase our odds of collecting trace DNA, and that is potentially on an item, thus aiding in the investigation with any DNA profiles that may be developed. The second one is the forensoscope. It is a singular device that has taken something that used to be very cumbersome in applying in forensics and streamlined this method. The forensoscope utilizes wavelengths on the electromagnetic spectrum. Us as humans, we actually only see a small portion of that spectrum. It uses wavelengths that are outside our capability of being able to view them, thus making very small, minute evidence visible to us. It not only can detect if there's small evidence that we cannot normally see with just the human eye, it also has the capability of documenting this evidence through its camera function. It has 48 megapixels and can take fine detailed photos of these items of evidence. Because of the forensoscope's compact size, we are able to utilize it in our forensics lab here at headquarters or also out in the field. Both tools that we have added to our forensic unit are new innovative ways of viewing and collecting evidence. We are excited to implement these tools and look forward to seeing the benefits that they provide in our investigations. I would like to personally thank you, Chief, and your staff for making it possible to add this technology to the forensics unit. Thank you so much for your time.
And thank you, Savannah and George, for advocating for these systems and continuing to build our technology portfolio at RPD. So now I'd like to give an update on our recruiting challenges. So our applications from 2023 to 2024 were up 9.6%. The laterals were up 8.5%. The 129th currently has 24 recruits that will graduate in May of 25. That's our largest class since 2019, so we're really happy with that. But our sworn staffing is at 591, and as you all know, we're authorized for 755. The current professional staffing members, those are non-sworn individuals, we're authorized for 126, and we are at 102. So we're hiring. I'm also pleased to note that we will have a huge group, 57 applicants, that are scheduled to attend the initial written test and physical fitness test at our academy on February 1st. So trending in the right direction, but again, as I always say, this is a long-term challenge for us, and we are committed to building back our ranks. But in the meantime, we're finding ways to leverage professional staff members to do jobs that used to be done by sworn officers, to think smarter and be more effective by leveraging technology so we can be more effective and efficient. And I think the results are good, but more officers are needed, no doubt about that. And I'd also like to give an update on New Year's Eve random gunfire investigations. I did this last year. We talked about it. You know, New Year's Eve, myself and all the captains and senior command staff, we went out with the officers New Year's Eve. And for anyone that's been in Richmond at New Year's Eve, you know what it sounds like. There is gunfire everywhere. And it's very challenging for us. So the reason I want supervision in the field with the officers is we could very easily find ourselves in very dangerous situations confronting all the armed people. So and sometimes we have to go out. There are people who are reporting being shot at certain locations. That happened this year. Someone was shot in the foot, and we had to, right at midnight, had to go to Wickham Court. We also had a May Day right after that. In the Shockoe Bottom, so our officers had to respond while it was really chaos. But one of the things I'm committed to doing, and it is after this event, we have investigators following up on leads, utilizing gunshot detection, utilizing cameras. So in this case, we were able to charge 3 individuals. Mr. Michael Hicks was charged with willfully discharging a firearm within 1,000 feet of a school. That's the 1300 block of Coulter. Demetria Drake was charged with discharging a firearm in a public place, 2300 Carmine Street, and Paul Jones was charged with willfully discharging a firearm within 1,000 feet of a school, also in the same 1300 block of Coulter Street. There are currently other investigations ongoing. Well, we can do this by utilizing other evidence and footage and following up with search warrants, and that's what our team has done. All right, so that concludes the presentation. We will be able to answer a few questions here, but there is something while I have you here that I'm going to make the community aware about since I'm here. So today I talked a lot about traffic. So every time I go to a community meeting, traffic is the #1 topic, whether I'm in the East End, the West End, North Side, or South Side. And yesterday, I was involved in an incident. So I was I was at work, I was in my police car going to a meeting. I was driving southbound on the Lee Bridge when one of the officers who I send out every day to pull people over, pulled me over in my police car. And after learning how fast I was going, I spoke to his supervisor and asked him to come to headquarters. He came here, He informed me that I was going 61 miles an hour in a 35. So I asked him to issue me a summons. This is the summons. So it's important for me, it's important for our community to slow down, and I will deal with the consequences of this. So I didn't want you to hear it from somewhere else, you're going to hear it from me. So now I'm able to answer any questions you may have. And certainly some of our guests too, if you'd like to talk about that.
Graham Limbaugh with the Richmonder. Why were you going so fast?
Well, I was going to a meeting. It wasn't an emergency. So if I were going in an emergency, it wouldn't be, I wouldn't have gotten a summons. But it's, there's no good reason. So, like I said, I'll deal with the consequences. Jamal?
Yeah, Chief, you talked about Operation Safe Summer and how crime has gone down since that happened. I know one of the things you said before was about getting guns out of the hands of juveniles as well. Is there anything else that you're looking to try to implement, whether it be in communities or specifically with officers, to make sure that doesn't happen again this year?
Yes. So I think front-loading that, I think preparing for the summer, working with our partnerships, but also looking for those deterrent strategies, looking for those interventions with kids early on, working with RPS, gyms, the RVA League for Safer Streets, RVA cooks, individuals who are individuals of goodwill trying to keep our kids busy. And if they're busy, they're not going to be in trouble. So that's going to be our focus as we prepare for the summer. Thad?
Yeah. Chief, you mentioned the Chaco area being kind of a problem for firearm thefts, and that you don't have it quite pinpointed down, but what type of resources can you put in those areas to help?
Well, we saw a bit of a reduction, but it came at a tremendous financial and manpower cost. So we spent, I briefed out last quarter, we talked about part of our Operation Safe Summer was I mandated overtime in the Chaco Bottom. I mandated, we had our Operation Safe Summer officers down there seizing, I think we seized 50 guns in a month. And the issue with that is, there were probably 250 guns that were visible that we couldn't seize legally. So I'm very concerned about the Chaco Bottom. We're talking with the city attorney's office to see if there's a way we can limit the ability for folks to carry openly guns in what is essentially an entertainment district. I don't know if that's possible, but I can tell you that other cities in their entertainment districts have experienced mass shootings. I showed a video at the last press conference that showed a young lady who was involved in a fight who fired a gun in the air. And the concern that all of our officers have, including myself, when I was down there seeing what I saw, is that all it takes is one person to get shot, and then all hell breaks loose, and everyone's going to start shooting. And that's a real, clear concern of mine. I think Birmingham had 18 people shot. I know we've had other serious mass shootings where everyone's armed, and once that first bullet flies, everyone starts shooting. So that's the focus, and we're thinking about it now before the traffic picks up in the bottom during the summer. All right.
So with all this data you've given us on violent crime and gun violence, are we kind of tracking national trends, or are we anything looking out of sync with larger trends in either a good way or a bad way?
I think a good indicator of the homicide rate is the homicides per 100,000. I think that's but I always say this, Graham, there's no place like Richmond. It's hard to compare us to other cities. We have specific challenges. We have a poverty rate of about 20%. We have, just unique historic issues in Richmond that has always led us to thinking back when I was at the University of Richmond in 1996, and Richmond was 1994, and Richmond was the murder capital of the country per capita. And we are a bigger city now population-wise, yet we have less murders. But I do look at the trends. I do talk to chiefs around the country, and I think many people missed the 2020 spike in homicides. We were right consistent. Where we jumped was 2021. There's a lot of reasons for that, I think. But it took a lot of hard work to get us back, and I think we're back trending in the right direction, with the caveat of saying I know no murder is acceptable to us, and we want to keep that as low as possible. Jamal?
Yeah, I know you said motor vehicle thefts are down 6%, but attempts did go up. Besides, obviously, and specifically the Hyundais and Kias, is there anything besides giving out steering wheel locks and anything else that you may be trying to implement with your team or with the community, and can you give specifics on it?
Well, I can tell you that every Monday I have a meeting with the captains where they present out on their weekly crime, and we're always talking about motor vehicle thefts. The concern I have is certainly the property angle of it, but we often see the robbery yesterday where our officers did such great work involved a stolen vehicle. So thieves steal cars and use them for violent crimes too, so it's even worse. But that being said, the trend that we're looking at, and I don't quite know how to judge it yet, but the attempts going up while the successful ones going down, I think is a positive trend because that means thieves aren't being successful. We talk about the problem with the Shockoe Bottom with theft from motor vehicles are, as soon as someone starts finding guns, it's going to ramp up. So success leads to more attempts for criminals. So I think as folks, as the updates come in those two particular cars, as we blanket the city with those wheel locks and thieves aren't able to have the success, I think we'll be in a better place. So I think that was actually an interesting trend that I hope is showing in the future some benefit for us.
Chief, is there an expansion plan for the gunshot detection devices? I know you said you're starting in the East End, but do you guys have specifics as to how you're going to sort of expand those across the city?
Well, I think what I've asked our real-time or Capital City Intelligence Center to do is really analyze it. It's, I'm a big believer in technology, but it has to make sense long term. So we have a 2-year contract. We will do an assessment, and if our team says it's valuable, we will make that investment. If they don't, we won't. Jamal?
Last question. I know obviously with the Operation Safe Summer, and a lot of things that have happened, you guys were in several communities this summer and throughout the year trying to make sure that people knew that you were here and you cared about what was going on. However, a lot of people that I did speak to felt like you guys were only here when crime was happening. Is there any attempt that you guys are going to be making to make sure that you guys are always around the community so it's not just about violent crime or when that pops up or anything like that?
I hear that too, and that is why we focus so much on the hotspot curve. So that is a self-generated call for service where our officers go to one of those spots that are struggling with gun violence, and they're not there to arrest people. They are there in the community, and studies show that that it deters crime. But what I'm more interested in is the good folks who get to see those officers in these neighborhoods, whether they're out of their car talking with people or they're sitting in there with their steady blue light flashing. It creates a sense of safety, and that's a huge part of what our community, the perception can be reality. I talk about these stats all the time, but when you tell a community member who's seen a murder in front of their house, they don't feel it. So it's important for us to forward deploy. And another point that I've said before, but it bears repeating, I will never make a goal for traffic stops for our officers. I'll never make a goal for gun seizures or felonies. I know where that can go. That can go in a bad way. But I do have goals for these. So this is something everyone in the police department can participate in. I participate in them. And there is no negative. Even if, and there's an example, we had a murder in the Shockoe Bottom. I had an officer at one of these hotspots, heard the gunfire. He was a supervisor, actually, a sergeant, doing a hotspot curve, heard it, ran over there, arrested the suspect. He's holding literally a smoking gun. And we make that arrest, and the benefit of the velocity of that type of homicide investigation is that person not only cannot hurt anyone else, but they're not going to be our next victim. So the speed of which our detectives are able to arrest people and our officers are able to stop them really helps benefit it. So I think that's part of it. But again, I didn't have a slide about it, but we talk about it a lot. I have a monthly community walk in a neighborhood that's struggling with crime. The next week after that, we do a pop-up where there's a DJ, and I want our community to see our officers interact with us when there's not crime scene tape up, so they can get to know us as human beings, which we are. Sometimes people look at this uniform and they think of us as robots or, RoboCops, and we're not. We're just mothers and fathers and brothers and sisters. We're human beings and members of the community like anyone else. We just chose a profession to protect people.
Grant?
So we have a new mayor as of a few weeks ago. Has he given you all any sort of directives or instructions on what he'd like you to focus on or going into the new year? Or are you all just kind of doing the same things you've always done?
I meet frequently with Mayor Avula and his team, and they have some things that we may be announcing that we are going to do a little bit differently this year. So I think there's definitely an opportunity to incorporate his vision of public safety.
TBD on what those things are?
TBD.
One last question about the Yellow House sort of situation. I know you said it's like a pretty specific situation, but if people see things kind of like that, where do they start in terms of citizens being able to report to you guys, hey, I don't have a specific thing, but there's a lot of things happening over here? Where do they start sort of in getting that ball rolling?
Well, we want to start with the precincts, and I don't want to name the location, but there's another location where we're working on a similar case with the Richmond Commonwealth's Attorney's Office. And it's a business, but it's a similar type situation where it's fostering crime. So working with the prosecutors and working with the business owners to say, hey, this is the data we're seeing, and we're going to be a partner with you. If not, we may take other steps. So again, the idea is not to be taking property for folks. The Yellow House was just so egregious, and if you have a chance, I would recommend looking at the seizure order. It should be online. If not, James can get it to you. It's an incredible read. And talk to Miss Worsham back there. She can tell you some stories. And Dr. Newble, who I'm sorry I didn't see you back there, but Dr. Newble from the City Council, that's her district, and I'm quite sure her inbox was full with complaints from that specific house. All right, folks, thank you all for coming.